What's up everyone, it's Magic here, and this is Sony RX1R Mark II, and I absolutely adore this camera. This is an old full frame camera with a fixed 35mm f2.0 lens, which is my favorite combination, full frame plus 35mm wide aperture lens. This is my bread and butter. And here's the thing, I do own multiple full-frame cameras. I have my Sony a7 IV that I use for my work. I have multiple lenses. I have like 35-1.4, 35-1.4, 35-1.4. How many 35-1.4s I have? But then whenever I get to travel, I don't want to bring those big cameras anymore because I don't want to work anymore. I just want to enjoy and photograph. And so far, for like that kind of stuff, I use my iPhone, which was my go-to camera, always in my pocket. Great photos. I love shooting with iPhones. But then since I had access to this one, I borrowed this from like my fellow Sony ambassador, Robert Wolański. So thanks to Robert, this camera was actually my go-to camera on this trip. And let me tell you that I didn't feel like any weight of this camera. This is like the smallest full frame camera I think there is with like a fixed lens. Is much smaller than Leica Q. It's even smaller than 100V in terms of like the body size. Shooting this camera, like obviously the tech is way behind. It's not even close to what a7 III is capable of, like not even talking about a7 IV or any of the new cameras. It's the same kind of like tech that was in a7R Mark II. So like imagine like a couple years back, not great autofocus, no eye autofocus tracking that would just track wherever, however, no real-time tracking autofocus. None of this is in this camera. But what is in this camera is that combination of an amazing Zeiss lens and a full frame sensor. And the images I took on this trip, amazing. Like even just like a simple street photography stuff on a day one that I just arrived and just started walking on the street and shooting the rich colors, you know, the vibrance of the colors, then like adding my preset on top of it was just like bring all these colors like to life. By the way, you can purchase my preset, Magic Cadabra preset, here down in the description. And this 35mm that was specifically designed for this camera, like it's outstanding. Like I wouldn't call that is like the most corrected lens in terms of like it has like sort of like a barrel distortion to it, but it does give you that nice look, background blur, and overall just like a great image. But since this camera actually has like the same sensor that I used for majority of my work in the past few years, I used my Sony a7R III cameras like for all my weddings in the last couple of years, and this is exactly the same sensor. So I was like, hey, I can probably shoot like actual portraits or stuff like this with this camera. So I set up a shoot with my friend Mariana. Thanks Mariana for doing this in Domino Park, and it was amazing. Like just look at these photos, like the background blur, like the way you can just shoot portraits with such a tiny camera. I felt kind of stupid because I invited Mariana being like, hey, I need someone to photograph. Can you just help me out and just pose for me a bit? Like I'm guessing she was expecting like a real deal camera, and I just show up with this tiny camera that looks like a toy. But like the results for me at least are outstanding. And then I actually shot with this camera like throughout the old trip, and also back at home I started using this camera on a regular basis. So this camera for me is a perfect all-arounder. I have never had a camera like this that is just so light, that is lighter than my actual water bottle that I keep with me. By the way, water bottle, I should probably sell these. This is a Magic water bottle. So this camera is lighter than the water bottle that I brought with me. So these were the only two things that I was like walking on the streets of New York, and now walking back at home, you know, going out, pick up my kids, take some photos right away when they get out of school, like getting like all that everyday life documentary. Okay, so now let's maybe talk some bad things about this camera. Are there any bad things? So the one thing that you could call bad thing would be the batteries are small, so they run out quite quickly. Personally, I had 3 batteries on me on that trip. I shot whole session of Mariana, which was like 2 hours of shooting without changing the battery. I shot like streets and probably changed the battery once. Also, you can just power it with a power bank, and since most of us all the time carry a power bank, this is convenient. The only inconvenience is that because it's an older camera, it does have an older USB micro type, you know, the one that you don't have cables on you these days anymore. And then obviously, you know, like in terms of like autofocus is not so snappy, so taking anything that would be more dynamic, so my kids running, is just more difficult. Still, like the way I shot it was just a single autofocus, just a center point, focus, recompose type of way of shooting. So very old school type of photographing, especially if you are now into the new mirrorless tech, but still that was really fun to shoot. And the last but not least, the problem is that this camera is out of production. And I so much wish that Sony would make a third version of this camera, so maybe RX1R Mark III with like all the newest tech with like a real-time tracking and all that stuff. That would be amazing. That would be actually for me a first day purchase, like bam, right away I would purchase a camera like this, because these days if you want to buy this old beauty, like you cannot buy it new in box. You have to search like eBays or like auctions, so find a way to purchase a used one. There's one in Poland, which I'm kind of leaning towards getting. I'm still like debating. Even though I love this camera, I don't know. What would you guys do? So like I also want to try that Leica Q and X100V, just to see if I get the same vibe of shooting these cameras versus this one. Like I've seen already tons of comparisons, but for me, I just need to test this out myself. So just watch a couple more photos from this camera, and also check the videos of how I edit my photos if you like the colors on this one. And I see you guys in the next video. Ciao.